Let's do this.
I'm ready.
The Daily Carry Podcast, episode number 20002. And here we are, ready to talk again. Hopefully you tuned in to episode 1. We just recorded a couple of days ago. We had a good conversation then. Excited to have the conversation we're going to have today. It's going to be me and Micah talking again, and we've got a lineup of guests expected in future episodes. But for now, it'll remain me and Micah in this episode and probably the next episode or two. And today we've got a really exciting topic. But before we get into that, if this is your first time tuning in, the Daily Carry Podcast, let's just make sure you know what the intent is here, what the goal is, what the theme is. And if you're expecting there to be a central theme and a focus, there really isn't one. We're really going to be covering, talking about mostly everything.
Yep.
And but there will be a underlying theme that will be a light that's brought to pretty much all the conversations that we have. And that is, we are talking about what we carry every day and how we carry it.
Yep.
And that's very important to Micah and I both, from the standpoint of being instructors, from the standpoint of being business owners, from the standpoint of being husbands, mentors, whatever life may find us and throw at us, whatever roles we may have, we want to make sure that we're doing our best to carry what we have and carry it well.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about that even more today because the topic, the subject matter we're really going to be diving into, with it being June, it seems pretty fitting to have a discussion about men, manhood, what we carry as men, how we carry it. And that's the discussion I think we're ready to just go ahead and dive right into.
Yeah, I agree. And this is, for the gals out there listening, I think this will be an important episode for you. Keep it on in the background and just walk this journey with us a little bit. I think it'll open your eyes.
Now, to give a little bit of context as well, to give a little something to look forward to, we're hoping to coordinate to have our wives on next week.
Yep.
And we'll be able to let them give a little insight and perspective into womanhood and what women carry. And I'm sure they'll do a whole lot better of a job than us trying to cover some of that material. But I agree with you that this is definitely going to be something I think interesting to listen to for anybody out there, and just kind of just having a conversation. It's not like we have all the answers to life, but between you and I, we've been there and done a whole lot of that. And I think we've got at least a few good things that we could probably say to hopefully encourage some people out there, and at least give some ideas as to what it's like to be a man and what comes along with that, what comes with the territory. If you're going to be a man, and if you're really going to carry yourself as a man the way that you should, or to the best of your ability, that's really what we're going to start to unpack. And we've got a lot to talk about in that regard, because there's certainly a lot, and especially considering there's multiple different avenues that people can take with their lives. There's multiple different careers. There's multiple different hobbies. There's a lot of different approaches, a lot of different paths to walk. And so we want to make sure that we're going to be speaking from experience as far as the journeys that you and I have both walked on individually and the experiences that we've had in our own lives, but also we'll do our best to bring this general understanding that can apply to manhood as a whole, concepts, themes, biblical references, which the first one really to get us started, I think, is what we referenced a few times, Proverbs 27, and that is iron sharpens iron. We referenced this in episode 1 a few times, we just said iron sharpens iron. But it's important because the scripture doesn't end there.
Right.
It says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And I think that's a very important context to bring into this conversation, because you and I are sitting here because of, as one man sharpens another, we have continued to encourage each other to make this happen, to get on air, so to speak, to have a conversation and not be afraid to put it out there and let anybody who's interested in listening give it a listen. And we just had 11 a.m. class running behind us. If you don't know, if you're tuning in to the podcast for the first time, we are coming to you live from the Rock Jiu-Jitsu team here in Castle Rock. And we had a perfect example of iron sharpens iron, as one man sharpens another. We had that in 11 a.m. class running behind us here just a couple of minutes ago. And that's a perfect example. Jiu-Jitsu is a perfect example of manhood working in a way to make sure that we are encouraging each other, sharpening each other, making each other the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And there's a lot that goes on with that. And there's a lot to talk about just within that. But let's just talk about manhood. And I've said a lot here, so I'll let you kind of speak to what you're wanting to cover a little bit today. Kind of just give us an idea of what we can probably expect in this conversation.
Well, I think you opened it well. The one thing that I'll throw out right out of the gate, just because we're talking about doesn't mean we have all the answers. And this isn't some, hey, Jared and Micah are doing some thus saith and, preaching down at you or Bible thumping you or telling you that you're doing it wrong. And in fact, it's mostly trial by fire, lessons learned, things that we've learned from our own journeys, peers, constituency, folks that speak into our lives, people that have mentored us, people that we're mentoring, because you're always learning while you're mentoring. But this is a conversation that is the reason I said gals, if you're listening, we're married and we have ups and downs and highs and lows. We'll do marriage at another time, but I only bring that up from the standpoint, if you're young and you're dating or you're trying to figure your life out, there's just a lot that goes into this stuff. Right. So I want, for me, I want to get across to people that men are wired very, very different from women. Our wives balance us, right? Like we're soulmates, we're together, we're in this fight, but what is it like to be a guy? Well, guys compress, guys compartmentalize, guys don't often show their emotions, guys hide their feelings, guys fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. And you might be thinking, if you're watching today's modern, live world of what's happening literally right now in America, you might be thinking, well, there's all sorts of people portraying their emotions and their feelings and everything that's going on out there. But I'm talking of substantive value. I'm not talking about surfacey stuff that people are reacting to out of emotion and going out and running amok in the world. I'm literally talking about what it's like to be a man, growing up, turning into a man, leading as a man. You and I have talked offline, and I've said this for many, many years. I know from my background, I know a lot of tough guys. I know a lot of bad dudes. Law enforcement, SWAT, fugitive, undercover, training with Spec Ops, Special Forces. I have met some really, really tough dudes. I've met some really bad dudes on the mat. And when I say bad, I mean as in their ability. Like they are very, very good at what they do, and they can tap you quickly, and they're just dominating. But the one thing that I'll say is I don't think I know a lot of strong men. I don't think I know a lot of strong leaders. I know a handful, and I try to surround myself with those people. But that's where I gravitate to. I think that's why we gravitated towards each other, because while we're generationally very different in age, we're not different in mindset.
That's not that different. You're not that old. Be a little nice to yourself.
I could
here.
be your dad. I could be your dad and then some. So I'm drawn to hard work, guys who get after it every single day, guys who are not afraid to take on a challenge, a task, all that stuff. But if you're the gal out there listening, there's prices that are paid for things like this. And I think I was talking offline to you about the Dax song, To Be a Man. I'd mentioned, I think before, close to 40 million views, 10 million reaction videos. And I've sent this video to other guys. They've come back to me either immediately or in person in tears saying, dude, that song encapsulates in 3.5 minutes exactly what it's like to be a guy. I've played it for my wife. She's played it for friends of hers. And they just like, I had no idea. I had no idea that's how you guys felt. And so talking about this stuff is important, especially, this month designated to men's mental health awareness. 24 hours ago, and I'm not going to go deep into this. It's a deep subject. I'm not going to go deep into it, but I lost a friend yesterday who I've literally known the better part of, 31 years, and got a call from his wife this morning at 6:40 in the morning, and he took his life. And I don't know what I don't know right now, but I know I didn't talk to him, and I know he didn't reach out to me. And I know that he's got a legacy career and some accolades that are hard to rival, but something brought him to darkness to a level that he couldn't contend with anymore. So, this is it's a timely episode. It's a hard episode. I'm fighting back emotions in this right now. But at the same time, I think it's so important for us to discuss, and not just because of suicidal awareness or whatnot. I don't want to belabor a point. It's a travesty. It's a tragedy. A lot of things that I wish I could undo right now. But guys go through things in a different way than what women go through. We have some overlapping traits and qualities for sure, human beings. But at the end of the day, chromosome makeup is different. We're different. We're fighters. We're warriors. We're protectors. We want to go lead. We want to take on the battle. And we don't always know how to talk about it. We don't always know how to share it. We don't always know what to say when we're going through something. And we're really bad about doing it with our other halves sometimes. And if we're single, sometimes we're just not really good at doing it in a group or one-on-one with a guy. I know for me, it took years to talk about some things that happened in my childhood, and it didn't come out until I was 13, 14 years into marriage. And because you stuff it down, you hide it, you have shame, you have fear. And even if you haven't done anything wrong, like for me, it was a sodomy thing as a kid. I was a young boy. But it didn't change the fact that I carried it with me most of my life. And once I finally got it out, it changed my world. So I just mentioned that as a point of reference because we get a lot of guys that are going through things right now. And it doesn't mean that their problems are more important than their wives, but it is important to understand that guys look at it different in most cases than women do.
You just dropped a lot in
Sorry.
What you said. So we're going to have to unpack a lot of what you just said because I don't want to just glance over some of the things that you said that we really, the whole point of this episode, talking about men, what we carry, how we carry it, making sure that we know how to carry it well to the best of our ability. There's a lot that you just said that I really think needs to be discussed further. But before we do that, I think it's important. You kind of went back to a couple of different times you said men process things different than women, and they do. That is the truth. Very important for anybody listening. We're not taking anything away from what women go through. Women go through what they go through. But what's very important, and here's the thing, I would probably be received pretty awful if I just flat out said that I don't believe in equality, because I do believe in equality for the most part. But I think a better word for it is wholeness. I believe in wholeness, and I believe that men and women are both 50%. I believe they're both halves that together make a whole.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's wrong.
I think that the point that I'm making is I'm not saying that there's anything more or more special about what a man goes through. That's not what we're saying. But we are saying that a man has things in life to face, to carry, to battle that women are not going to have. And the same is true the other way. Women have things in life to face, to battle, to carry that men are not going to have, and they're going to have a hard time even sometimes understanding.
That's correct.
But what we're focusing on, what we're talking about today, is manhood and how we can be able to better manage, better carry the load that we have on our shoulders as men. Because Lord knows, and many men listening to this, anyone listening to this should know, we can carry a lot. And there can be many times in our lives where we put on too much, and sometimes it's even ourselves. We just keep loading it up. Oh, we can do this. We can do this. But what I think we should probably start to pivot to and talk about a little bit more is you were just very open and honest in talking about some emotions that you're holding back. And, obviously our hearts go out to your friend, the family, and any friends involved in the passing of your friend. But even just something like that can present one of those events in people's lives where it can be, grief is, there's full-blown courses that you can take in grief and grief management, grief counseling. And grief can be something that really pushes people down a road of isolation and suppression. And the way that we just kind of glanced over that and a couple of the other things that you just said, I want to take time and make sure that we honor that you're sharing, that you're opening up, that you're saying to everybody listening, you're having these emotions. And I want to make sure that we're giving honor to obviously the completely horrific circumstances of your friend's passing. That's absolutely horrible. But I'd like to ask, was this person, you said you knew him, and I don't want to get into any details that you're not comfortable with sharing, but was this person in the service? Was he served with you, or you just knew him through that? Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, he's former military, former law enforcement, so he served in both capacities. Worked with him. He was at a different agency, but I've known him literally my whole life, adult life, that is.
So as we've seen in the news and articles, different podcasts, it seems that a lot of service members, whether it be agencies, whether it just be military veterans, obviously PTSD being a factor, it seems like that's a pretty big issue out there. And with some of this trauma that servicemen go through, that service people go through, military veterans, with this PTSD, And with getting out of the service, I've heard I'm not law enforcement. I'm not in the military. I was never in the military. I'm not a veteran. I've been a civilian. I'm a civvy through and through. But I'm thankful for every person that has put their life on the line to serve, to protect our country. And I want to talk about this issue because it seems like there is absolutely this issue with people and their mental health. It's not just veterans. It's not just people that have been in service, but it seems like that they are this category, at least from statistics that are shared, talked about, that there's quite a bit of a crisis with mental health with a lot of veterans out there. And do you think that a lot of that could just be coming from whenever they get back into civilian life, maybe they're retired, whatever it may be, just this feeling that they have to suppress everything that they've seen, everything that they've gone through, like they have nobody to talk to? I've heard that whenever veterans come back and they don't have that same people that they were shoulder to shoulder with, that they have this really hard time adjusting to civilian life and not feeling like they're part of that band of brothers that they weren't that they were in once before. So I think you are in a position, much more experience in that regard, to be able to kind of just speak to what it's like to go through some of those things, whether you're on a call and you saw some stuff and it's hard to process. And sometimes it makes you feel like, man, I have nobody to talk to. I feel like you probably have a better insight into that world than I do. In fact, I know you have a better insight into that world. And I think we should just talk about that perspective for a minute, because we'll get into what it's like just in everyday, regular civilian life in a minute. But let's talk about specifically from your experience, what it's like to be on some of those calls where that was traumatizing. That was hard to see. That was hard to see that, to go through that, and what it's like, maybe some of the things going through your mind of, man, I don't know if I can ever tell my wife that. I don't know if I could ever tell my kids that. And just some of those things, but whether it's calls like that or just anything else on the job that you can think of, let's just talk about that for a second.
You know, I want to do justice to anybody that's ever served in a uniform, be it military, fire, EMS, law enforcement. You want to be careful when you speak for other people, because there's guys and gals that they got their own stuff, and this is not a catch-all statement. And this, I'm going to do it from my perspective and my perspective only when you ask. I would say the challenge right out of the gate is your own awareness of your own awareness. In other words, what is my capability? My very first call, and I'll go a little dark for a second, but in an important way. So my very first call as a medic in 1990, before I went into law enforcement, was unfortunately a motorcycle double rider versus assigned, both decapitated. First call, very first call. Like literally first call as a medic. And once you see something like that, people are, there might be people at home listening going, oh, dude, why are you talking about this? Because it set the tone and the stage of what you're going to deal with for the rest of your career. And if you were over in the box and you're serving, and I got a lot of buddies of mine that did multiple tours. I was stateside while they were over there. I was actually going Blackwater at the time to do private security stuff while I was in law enforcement. But I mentioned that call because if my first call had been an anaphylactic reaction, or my first call had been, a slip and fall or a broken arm or maybe a myocardial infarction or something that had happened, I don't know if they would have set the tone the same way. For me, I had to walk up, look at that and go, if I can deal with this, I can deal with anything. And a lot of people are like, well, how do you get that image out of your head? Well, you don't. It's how you start to contend with it. And there's a lot of guys out there that just never, that's why I said you gotta be aware of your own awareness. Because you can get dropped into a hotbed of stuff pretty fast, and then you realize, man, I'm in over my head, or I don't know how to contend with it, or I don't know who to turn to. And it's hard because a lot of people, we talked about, I believe, Cooper's Colors in the first one. There's a lot of people that live in that naivety that it's not because they don't know that stuff happens in the world. They just don't want to know what happens in the world. And that's not necessarily a bad place to be. I mean, it's actually a pretty comfortable zone to live in. But you also have a calling of other folks that they're not afraid of what's happening in the world. They want to go fight evil on the front lines, or they want to go help people. They have a duty, they have a deal inside them to serve, and they feel duty bound. And that for me is it's in every element of my life, whether I was coaching high school here at hockey at Douglas County, whether I'm out on the mat getting trained or trying to help in women's self-defense, whatever it may be, or I'm doing tactics at the range. I just want to make people better, but I feel duty bound. Like I feel duty bound to make life better for other people. So I try to put my best into everything I do. The problem is when you're doing that at 1,000 miles an hour all the time, and it's op after op after op, and you're going from warrant to warrant and service to service and call to call, most cops in a semi-busy city will see in a month, and I think this is important, they will see in a month what most people will see in the civilian life in a lifetime. In a month. In a moderately busy agency. In a rogue warfare agency, like I started in Detroit, the stuff I can tell you as a medic that I saw in the first 6 months was enough to last a lifetime. And it's not a exaggeration. It is literally enough to last a lifetime. And then working in a trauma 1 center while I was going through my clinicals and my rotations and get my flight certification, different thing I was doing, you just see that much more, because not only are you seeing it on the front lines in real-time emergency response window reaction, you're also getting it in the ER when they come rolling in hot to you. So you're seeing it on both sides. So, for me, it was probably a good thing that I married a psychologist. She's able to, as she tells me, I can't treat you, but she gives pretty sound advice. And, yeah, so there is a depth, and the hard part is, and I don't want to, we want to do marriage at another time, but I think there is an important piece. When you get married in the military, if you are on the outside marrying into the military, the divorce rate is something north of 90%. And that's a pretty powerful stat, because what's happening is you have no idea what's going on over on the other side. And you and I both know, even here in the gym, we got a couple of military people that are married to each other, right? So their support system is each other. Like they know each other. They know exactly what the ops are. They know what's going on. They're like best friends. They get along because they get it. When I went into law enforcement, first thing I did is I just brought my wife on as many ride-alongs as I could when I was on the street before I went undercover. And even when I went undercover, at times I kind of integrated her in a little bit so she could see what it was that I was dealing with. And it gave her a much better balance. But as far as guys and how they deal with it, yeah, we stuff it, man. We stuff it. And I've never had anybody worth their salt that's been out in the streets and had to get into the mix, that has not come back to me and said, yeah, I stuff it down. I don't take it home at night. I just spent the weekend, not the weekend, excuse me. I just spent during this weekend at the pool, just some downtime on Saturday. And I met a Castle Rock cop that I didn't know, and his wife was there, and she's military. He's a cop. He's former SF. Really, I mean, this dude's legit and cool, even-tempered, amazing dad, watching him work with his kid. Like you just see this. He embodies toughness and strength and leadership and all this stuff. But his wife is sitting there right next to him, just encouraging every moment of it, and he's encouraging with it. Like they understand each other's world. And I think when you don't understand the other world, that's where it becomes very, very dangerous. It becomes very, very hard. There's a lot of cops out there that their wives never get invited in, or husbands, depending, into their world. And so they don't understand what it is they're going through and they're seeing daily. And I'll reiterate it one more time. If you're in a busy department, you'll see more in a month than most people will see in a lifetime, as far as bad. And that's hard for people to understand.
I think this is a great way to be kind of having the beginning stages of this conversation, because that's also an important conversation right now in this country, is also law enforcement and the appreciation for law enforcement and what they go through, what they see. I'm a civilian. I can speak from a civilian standpoint, but obviously there's really one big piece of insight that we have as civilians that probably shouldn't even be as big of a piece as it is, and that's really just movies. That's Hollywood, right?
Sure.
And they always make it seem like that law enforcement guys, like, they are just inconvenienced, aggravated that they have to go in and do, psych eval or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's just movies. I have no idea what it's like from the actual inside of it. Maybe you can give us some insight on that. I mean, we're talking about men, what men go through. And obviously there's men and women who serve. We're thankful for both. Let's specifically talk to men, how these men handle that. Would you see the system right now as it goes, would you say that that's playing out relatively well, or is it lacking as far as like the systems that are in place for service people, whether it's mandated or whether it's just voluntary? You've been through something, whether it was a shooting, whether it was just a call to a traumatic scene, whatever it might be. What is your take on your experiences with the system as far as getting psychological support or getting mental health support? What does that look like?
Well, I can't speak to the military system and how that works. That would be a Brian, Esther, or my daughter at this point conversation probably. But on the law enforcement side of things, you ask an important question. So I don't think what the civilian population understands is what you go through, number one, to get in, two, what you do to stay in, and then three, the integrity you have to carry. I think I mentioned in the first podcast, I've known 2 cops my entire life that I probably would have fired or arrested out of thousands, and I'm one guy. The integrity that these guys have to stand on is huge. The ethics that they stand for, the color of authority, all of the things that go with the job, the psych evals, the polygraphs. The average person that mocks law enforcement wouldn't make it 4 minutes into the testing process, much less all the way through the recruitment process. And because we live in a world of social media where everything is right now, you see a cop screw up, or you see a bad choice, you see one of these goofy film auditors that are going out always trying to trap people all the time. They're just exposing shock value stuff in the moment, and they edit these videos down. What they have no idea that's happening is behind the scenes of what's really going on. So we as men, we stuff, we compartmentalize, we don't share. At least in the medic world, law enforcement world that I operated in, most of the bad became sarcastic. Most of it became a way of dealing and deflecting. You'd get on scene and you'd see something that's horrific. And I'm not saying we joke about it as it's bad, but you find a way to decompress that feeling inside of you by using things that the average citizen would look at and go, really? That's what you're doing? Yeah, you did. I mean, as a medic, when look, I don't know a number, but between working ER, medic, law enforcement, I've got to be north of 1,000 deaths. I've worked 51 homicides. I remember that off the top of my head. And every one of them are different. Some of them are horrific and some of them are hard to look at. Nothing affects you like a kid, though. Nothing. There's nothing out there that affects you like a kid. Work in the cancer unit and the burn unit at University of Michigan Hospital. When I first started my rotations, that's what I was assigned to. That there's a connection element to that is you just, from a protection to want to save, I can't even put into words how hard that is to watch a little one hurt or suffer or be in the middle of a horrific incident where they're a victim. Are there places for cops to go? There are. The problem is most cops don't want to talk about it. So what you're seeing in movies at times, I guess you'd have to give me a specific on a movie, but I like movies. I've seen a lot of cop movies. I like all of the John Wick stuff, and I like all of the John McClane back in the day and Die Hard. And is it real? No, I'm certain training is, but at the end of
Man, are you kidding me? It's not real.
Come on, man.
Come on. I wanted some of it to be
Ballerina,
real.
I can't wait to go see it. It looks epic. I would say most guys stuff, and I can kind of summarize your multi-point question into, we just don't deal with it. You just keep going and going and going day to day to day.
But is there like mental health? Like, is there an assigned psychiatrist, psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist? What does that look like?
I want to get Darren Weekly on the show, the sheriff here of Douglas County, and I want to sit down and have that conversation amongst other things. I would love to talk to him about. An amazing man, an amazing leader, a cop's cop all the way through. Very bright guy. I think he could speak to it far better than I could. Are they out there? Yes. Is my wife a psychologist dealing with this? Yes. Does she do EMDR training? Yes. Does she do PTSD stuff for come home military law enforcement guys? Absolutely. Do we talk about it? No. Confidentiality.
So it's just Mike Lowry in there, just woo-saw.
Yeah, woo-saw, just rubbing your earlobes, baby. And I respect the confidentiality twofold. One, it's their story to tell Jana, and Jana works with them. But more importantly, I don't ever want to speak into. She's never asked me a question, by the way. My wife has never come back to me and said, "Hey, I'm dealing with this cop. What do you think?" Nameless or not, she's just never done that, because then I taint that, because I'm doing it from my perspective or my opinion. So I just trust that process. So is it out there? Yeah, it's out there. Is it available? Of course it's available. The question is, are people willing to seek it? You said it earlier. You talked about it. June is Mental Health Awareness Month. Well, it might as well be Military and Law Enforcement Mental Awareness Month as well, because the number 22 a day, suicide, veterans. I mean, stop and think about that. Like that, soak in. It's awful. Like, I mean, you got 22 people on average a day ending their life that are all coming out of a service field, and the I don't know what the number is in law enforcement, but I bet it's pretty high as well. And yet we mock it, we want to defund it, and I just think it's because most people have no idea what's actually happening. So they see something they don't like. There's an authority telling them to do something or holding them to account. And the next thing you know, we're seeing what we're seeing in LA, and we can blame whatever source we want, but it's the cops dealing with it right now. It's just, that's a bona fide fact.
Whenever you were in service, was there any like protocols or mandates, anything like in whatever the requirements would have been? Like if there's an officer involved shooting, if there's anything like that, is there like a protocol like, oh, you have to go have an appointment? That's like a real thing?
That's a real thing. And in promotion there, it's a real thing too. So like when I went into SWAT, I had to do an extra psych test and an extra polygraph more often than I did when I was out on the road. When you promote into detective, at least in the agency I was, you had to do that again. And then depending on the division you worked in. So like if you were a detective that was working child cases, you had to do it like regularly, because the horrificness of what you're investigating is tenfold over what you're seeing on the street. So, they want to keep your stability there. They want to make sure that you're maintaining at the exact same time that there's integrity through and through. But yeah, it's nonstop, and it's written into policy everywhere you turn. I mean, the cops, if I go out back in the day, quick story. I was like in the chase capital of the world in Columbia, South Carolina. I worked in Richland County, and by pure numbers of just how many people were there, LA, you think car chases in LA. I was in over 400 in 5 years, car chases. And it was go, go, go all the time, always on. I mean, if you weren't in a chase, you weren't doing your job kind of deal. And you just get so used to the routine in that. Back in the day, you could burn a report. The point of this whole story is I could get into a chase, burn a report, put the guy in jail, call the paddy wagon over if I needed to, and I'd be done with that call in 30 minutes. I can tell you right now, if an agency here locally gets into a chase, that guy's doing 6 hours of paperwork afterwards. And people don't understand, because we have lawyered ourselves to death to the point the cops just get tired of this stuff. So it impacts a lot of things. It's not just the psyche of what you see and what you deal with. It's also the psyche of what you don't get to deal with, because we've policied and procedured ourselves to the point that it makes the job stressful in that way too. And what I'm starting to hear more from cops, current generation, last 10 years, they're so fed up with the P&P paperwork aspect of it, when you just want to go out and serve and protect people, but you're tied up at the office because you did the right thing and the guy's bonding out before your paperwork is done. I mean, the ink's not even dry on your paper and the guy's back out on the street. We just have a lot of problems in that system. And that's why I said I'd love to have the sheriff on right now, or get George Brockler in here and talk about these things, because it is a legitimate issue. And there is a psychological component that it plays on. It absolutely plays on the leadership of the agency. It plays on the street cops, because if they're tried and true and integrity based, and I believe the vast, vast, vast majority are, they want to be out there stopping crime. They don't want to be sitting back doing paperwork. Defense attorneys love making cops do paperwork. They absolutely love doing it, but it plays on their psyche, because they get frustrated, then they're irritated. They couldn't stop something. Then you find out about that bad thing that you were just in the neighborhood. Something happened to a family, happened to a kid. You could have potentially been there, quick response. Now you go home, your wife's going, what's wrong? You're upset. You get into a fight, and it just, the byproduct of the byproduct of the byproduct is awful. And that's why I think a lot of cops stuff. They just stuff. They stuff it down. They don't want to talk about it.
And then it kind of becomes like
it's
burdensome, that all this extra paperwork, all this extra frustration, and then they have these mandates for the psych evals or whatever. You go in and talk to a therapist, which those therapists are also probably, a lot of them, going to be product of the system as well, and
sure,
and maybe not have the same views or ideology as those individual officers may have. Maybe they're not even I don't know what it looks like in there, if they're allowed to choose their own, if they have to use the one that's hired by the agency, whatever. I'm not sure, but what I'm getting at is, so it sounds like what you're saying is, most of the time, whenever it comes to actually having a conversation, if you're not stuffing it down, most of the time it would probably be talking with your fellow service members, talking with those who have been there, done that. Maybe your partner who was on the call with you and having the conversation.
Yeah, I'm not running. I wouldn't be running to a therapist on everything that was going on, and the agency wouldn't have the bandwidth or the manpower or the finances to do something like that. So yeah, you might go to a peer, you might go to a supervisor or something like that, depending on the nature of it. I just put it into the context of, imagine, and I've never done fast food in my life, but imagine you're working at some fast food chain and somebody comes in, gives an order, you punch in the order, you collect their money, whatever it is, and you serve them the food. Imagine if you had to stop every order and go, Dave came in and ordered, $5 Lux menu. Dave was wearing this outfit. Dave seemed happy about this thing. Dave took 4 fire sauces and 2 mild sauces. He wanted Baja Blast Mountain Dew as opposed to Mountain. Imagine if you had to write a story on every customer that was coming in, how quickly that would get old for you. When your job is, hey, I'm here to help you. I want to give you your meal. You paid for it. Go enjoy your thing. That's how law enforcement used to be. And now it's just not. It is, you're just burdened with paperwork all the time. And then you hear the proverbial, and here's the hard part, I think. And this is ultimately, I think where it just transcends down to this bottom line level. There's never a cop when you need them. I've heard that story thousands of times in my career. Why is there never a cop around you when you need them? Well, I'll tell you why. And I can tell you the psyche that affects. It absolutely drives you crazy because all you want to do is get out there and help and stop. And are there sources for you to go to? Yeah, but are there bigger sources that are available to fix those problems? Not really. I don't
really want to get too much in the weeds here, but man, whenever you're talking about this paperwork, I just think about the day we're living in and the opportunity that seems to be kind of on the table right now. I mean, I think it's pretty much standard. Every department, everywhere, police officers wear body cameras.
Yeah.
There's got to be an opportunity for there to be some kind of an AI integration that every encounter, it goes ahead and it, makes that report for you just based on the video, the audio. That seems like that could be a pretty good, useful use of some of the capabilities of AI nowadays, because that's got to be frustrating. I mean, obviously, it's already a pretty big commitment from anybody nowadays to even make that decision, hey, I want to go into law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I think that there's been some concerns about not having enough recruits, right? Just because people are starting to kind of get completely turned off by the idea of ever being involved in that at all, just because of what you've said and what can go into it, how quickly something can go wrong. But I think it's very important to restate the statistic. I think that you even mentioned in the first episode, and that is, I think, like 102 million calls. Is that what you said, a year?
Yeah, for service nationwide.
Officers? Yeah, 102 million, and out of 102 million, there was only that handful that went bad, right? And
there's like it's like 164 officer involved shootings out of 1,004 that were questioned, and of that 1,004, there was 164, there was 18 that were unsolved, or the cop made a bad decision, kind of deal. But out of 102 million calls for service. And this is, by the way, this isn't a law enforcement conversation. Your question was specifically as to military and law enforcement. How do they deal with things? We can digress away from this, but my answer is how men deal with it is very different. I mean, even within the agency, how men and women deal with it is very different. So, what is it like to be a man walking that journey in that field? I guarantee you're stuffing down way more than the average civilian is. You're compartmentalizing way more. You're dealing, as far as statistics go, with the vast majority is bad. I mean, just very seldom does a law enforcement officer get a call to go over and have it be a good call. In most cases, you're dealing with something where there's conflict, strife, something elevated, an exigency, yada, yada, yada. I'm not saying there's not other fields that are out there that aren't like that. I mean, imagine being an ER doc. You're constantly dealing with trauma all day long. Go, 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 go. So yeah, there's things that are out there. It'd be like trying to be a teacher nowadays. I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like a teacher being in high school. But what's it like to be a man when you tack that world onto it? It's the weight is like a gorilla on your chest. And I think in most cases, guys have no idea what to do with that. And our gals don't always understand that because we don't do a good job translating that. And we hurt their feelings, we scar them, or we don't share with them, and they think we're not being vulnerable. And then we just get mad or we just get angry because we don't know how to contend with stuff. We were never really wired in a way. Men are just, by nature, we're fighters. I mean, we were bred that way. And we may live in a modern society where you're seeing a lot of crazy stuff happening out there, but the legitimate guy who, like, I could be there for you. If Jared called me up and said, Mike, I need you here in 10 minutes. I know you well enough that I don't need to ask, why do you need me there in 10 minutes? I just know that you need something and I show up, right? Not everybody does that. Not everybody does it. And that's why I said earlier, I know a lot of bad dudes. I know a lot of tough guys. I don't know a lot of strong leaders. And to be a strong leader, you got to be vulnerable enough to be able to admit your weaknesses or walk a journey with somebody or ask for help when you need it in the moment. And we're not good at that. We're not good at it with dudes, and we're definitely not good at it with our gals.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's very important. We've made some extreme examples, right? You've given some examples from the law enforcement side of things, from the service, and we've talked about military and law enforcement applications, even some trauma with the medical side of things. But whenever it comes down to just a regular everyday civilian, whether you're a plumber, electrician, whether you're a accountant, it's very important to understand that trauma comes in different forms. It's very important to understand that problems are problems. And we as men, we suppress things, whether it's extreme or not extreme. And it doesn't have to be that you walked onto emergency scene and saw in your first call instance, you saw this extreme, horrific accident, right? Yep. We every day walk through lives and our own individual respect that comes with a weight, that comes with what we have to carry every day. And the reason that I'm saying that is because as we start to shift more into just everyday men, anybody, regardless of what you do in life, we have to understand this underlying theme, and that is that we just have, especially as we kind of talked about in the last episode, we have this number one, we have this social media, we have this entire virtual world that's been being built and put into our lives and become a huge part of the structure of our society that's already kind of disconnecting us. But we have to take a step back and look at the full picture and look at the very real problem that we have, and that is that we're not talking enough. We're not having conversations enough. And I think with that comes a lot of the points that you're making, is that we shove it down tight. We don't talk about it. We don't want to think about it. We don't even want to, and I've had conversations with some other people. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot with that. I've had conversations with people recently sharing with me bad experiences that they've had, whether it was a former marriage, whether it was just childhood trauma, and started talking about it. And this specific instance that I'm thinking about off the top of my head happened a couple weeks ago. And he said, yeah, I guess I never really thought to think about it before and talk about it before, because I just have never wanted to even go there again. I never wanted my mind to go there again.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I'm no therapist. I'm no psychologist. I'm far from it. But there seems to be a lot of sense in that you're avoiding this. You don't want to talk about it because you don't want to go back there in your mind, and you think that it's actually helping you, but you're suppressing it. And then there's this release that happens whenever you finally tell somebody. But it's very important. You're telling the right person, because not everybody's equal, right? And I think that a lot of what we've talked about so far with law enforcement applications is talking to that, whether it's your partner that's on the same call as you, whether it's somebody you trust in the same agency, whether you're in your military and it's that band of brothers that you're connected with. It's having the right people around you. There's a lot that we can start to talk about and unpack just in talking about the people that you surround yourself with.
Oh, for sure.
Your circle. That's so important, because as important as it is to talk about what you're going through, how you're feeling, what's frustrating you, what you might be struggling with, whether it be an addiction that nobody knows about, whether it be just something that you're frustrated about, you don't feel like you've gotten the respect or the attention that you deserve, for whether it's on your job, whether it's in your marriage, and you just have these little things that are continuing to build up. To have somebody to talk to is very important, but it's also very important to make sure that you're talking to the right person. Because I can go and sit down and have a conversation with somebody that has no care, no interest in my life whatsoever. And even some people that may act like to my face like they care, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a lot to unpack there. And you have more years of experience than I do in that regard. And I'm sure that you've had some instances. In fact, one that I think is very important to bring this conversation to more applicable to everybody is another thing that we kind of glanced over early in your conversation, and where we started this out with is you shared a very important piece to this conversation, that there could be someone out there listening to that has had a traumatic experience in a place where otherwise they felt like they should be protected. And what I'm talking about is you shared about a bad experience that you had in the church from childhood. And there's definitely other people out there that have been through that maybe are still suppressing that, haven't talked to anybody about that, because that's got to be one of the most frustrating things ever, to be in a place where you're supposed to be able to get the help that you need. And there's still those people that are not genuine, that are wolves in sheep's clothing, so to speak. And I love it. Ties perfectly into your shirt there, because that's a wolf with a full kit on, with his rifle. And that's what's cool about that is that's not a wolf in sheep's clothing. If you're gonna be a wolf, you're gonna be a wolf. You're not gonna disguise yourself. You're gonna show yourself what you are. But let's get a little more serious here, because that shirt was just something that I thought about it whenever I made that analogy.
It's my sheepdog shirt. It was given to me by Yoster. Yeah.
Sheepdog response. Is that what that is?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, protecting the flock.
That's awesome. I love that. That's what we got to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right people that have the right intentions, that are interested in protecting and helping and being that mentor and being that iron that sharpens iron, because there's a lot of bad eggs out there.
Yeah.
And we got to be, first and foremost, we have to be intentional about choosing the right circle. We got to talk about for a few minutes, how can we make sure that we have the right people in our lives? Because there's even some people out there that, and myself included, I'm sure that you've had friends that you've been friends with for just forever. Mm-hmm. And there's some friends that, even though I've been friends with them forever, they're not the person I'm going to turn to and tell them what I've been going through, tell them what I'm struggling with, tell them what's making me anxious, tell them what I'm stressed about. That's a specific person that you got to be looking for to be able to open up about these problems, and to be able to open up about your own mental health and for your own benefit. We have to be very intentional about who we select to be in that circle. But that's what we got. I think that's the next thing to talk about, is building that circle around you of the right men, the right people to trust.
Yeah. So I think, if my memory serves me, I talked about this in the first podcast, but I'll summarize it quickly. My circle of friends is a bullseye on a target. God, family in the center. Next ring are guys that I've been through the door with. So I've lost, but dudes that served with me that understand what it was like to do that. So like, we can lean into each other from an experience standpoint, but I may never talk to them about like a business endeavor or, a church function that I'm going to, but we'll talk about those scars or the journey that they walked. And then there's another circle that goes outside of that are people that you trust with, like people that you can talk about life issues with. So that's how I do my world. Inner circle, second ring, third ring, and then the rest of the world. I would say, I mean, you bring up a really good point. Who do you trust? So I want to paraphrase something really quick, because this is when I'm looking at the camera. Gals, if your husband is mad and something has happened to him because he's put trust into somebody and he got betrayed, that's a very, very, that is a tipping point for a dude, I believe. This is just, I'm going to state my opinion. Guys don't really do well with that. When you feel like you've invested into somebody, they've got your back, they've looked you in the eye, they're there with you, you walk some degree of journey, maybe professionally or personally, friendship related, and you feel a bond, you feel a commonality, and you feel like, man, I if there was a place I could turn, I could talk to this guy. And then you get betrayed. You get the rug pulled out from underneath you, the wool pulled over your eyes. They were playing you the whole time. Maybe your discernment wasn't on. Maybe they didn't show their true colors. You want to go throat throttle that dude. That's like, as a guy, part of your emotion is you don't want to be sucker punched emotionally by somebody that you trusted in. So for me, everybody's got a story. I don't ever minimize theirs or maximize mine. Everybody's got a journey and everybody feels something different, and it could be highs to lows. If I just went in random fast order, sodomy started 6 to 8, small town Kentucky, happened in the church. Moved. My grandfather started a church in Michigan, ended up, there was some degree of pastoral affair with another pastor in that church. We moved to South Carolina, first church we moved to, pastoral affair, went to a different church, youth pastor affair, moved here to Colorado, went to church for 18 years in the same place, 2 lead pastor failures, 5 associate pastors, and 2 youth pastors, all moral failure, all of them. Which means we're just men. We're men that make really dumb decisions, do really bad things. And even though we carry this, and there's a different expectation for the guy in the church that teaches, because God's going to hold him to a higher account. We all know that. But if you grow up and your trauma starts in the church and your whole life, there's some kind of bad juju associated with the church. I can't tell you how many people have looked at me and go, dude, why do you even believe in God? Like, why in the world would you trust anybody? And I go, well, God didn't make those men do that. Those men did that. And those men lied and they covered it up and they did a lot of things. How I deal with that says more about me than how they deal with it, because I can forgive, I can let go, but they should be held to account. I may never trust them again, but I can forgive and walk away from that and go, hey, as long as you're held to account and you're not back up on the pulpit, I'm okay with your accountability. It's when you hide it, you deny it, you leverage it, and you hurt grown men that believe in you. That's where the fighter instinct for me, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's where it starts to come out, because I'm like, there's a lot of audacity in things like that. And you're using your platform to get the thing you want. And we all know this is true. We've seen this in, I won't name denominations, but we've seen this abroad in various church platforms. And so I want to make sure that if I'm the only version of a Bible somebody reads, I want to make sure that they're reading. I said it, I think the other day, that they're reading Ephesians. I want them to see love and respect and value. But when it's time to stand in the face of evil, I'm going to stand in the face of evil. And I don't think a lot of times guys know how to deal with that stuff when it happens, because we just go to anger. We almost want to go to get even. We want to go back and hold somebody to account harshly. And that's not meek. It's not humble. It's not really what we're called to do. There's a righteous judgment, and then there's judgment. And I think most people go to judgment. I don't think we go to righteous judgment very well. So God calls sin, sin. If the righteous judgment is there, you can get in front of the person and you can say, hey, look, here's what's going on. We need to chat about this. This is where Matthew 18 comes in. I've got a problem with it. I've come to you. We can't solve it. I bring somebody else in. If we can't solve it together, then we're going to bring a group in. I don't want to rabbit trail too far, but there's a lot of stuff that happens behind closed doors. And it goes back to the very first thing that I said. You compartmentalize stuff. You hide stuff. That you could be the preacher in a church hiding something and stuffing it down and hiding it and stuffing it down and hiding it. And then when it becomes public, everybody's shocked and awed and they can't believe it. It's how you react to it and what you do with it in that time. And that's where I believe we're missing the strong leadership. And that's just my personal opinion. But I believe at this juncture, I think we have a lot of really good men out there that get glossed over for the bad apple. And that bad apple is the one that gets the traction and the reactions and the frustrations. So I hope that answered the question. I don't know if I did.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure to take time to unpack that a little bit more, not just glance over it, because I think that's very important, because as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So I think just in your ability to be able to talk about what you've been through and be able to talk about, and you could have probably talked about it a little bit more, but you did mention it earlier in the podcast that eventually you got to the point of being able to talk to other people about that, and it took you some time to get there. And that's really what I think was very important, to give that a little bit more focus and emphasis. Is if there's anybody out there listening, you're not alone. There's people that have been there, they've done that, and they care. And if you've been through some traumatic situations, if you've been through through times or experiences that have caused you to doubt, to question whether it's humanity as a whole or whether it's Christianity, there is examples of bad people out there everywhere. No matter where you look, man is man, flesh is flesh, and there's going to be people, there's going to be experiences that they miss the mark entirely, and sometimes beyond that, they completely violate trust. They violate what is supposed to be the way that we interact with each other and have relationships with each other. And your experience being in the church it's a testimony that you are still here, that you are still standing on faith, that you still are not only willing to tell somebody else and share your faith, but willing to share your testimony and tell what you've been through. And that it took you that time to finally overcome this shame or this guilt or this whatever it was, bottling it up and shoving it down deep and not wanting to talk to anybody about it. You're an example, a great example for others to follow, that you don't have to live in that shame or in that that suppression, you gotta get it out, and you're gonna be the better for it. Your marriage is gonna be the better for it. In fact, the guy that's after you, that's been living with it, and he's maybe about to crumble because he's been trying so hard to keep it bottled up so tight that he's just about to fall apart. You got to talk to somebody. You got to talk to somebody who cares. And so going just back to what I was saying is finding the right circle, the people who care. And it can be tough, especially unpacking everything that we just said with there being moral failures in churches. Well, where do you turn to at that point? How do you build that circle? And I'm biased. I think jiu-jitsu right off the bat, but it's very important. There's some jiu-jitsu gyms out there that are just all about partying it up. They could care less about you individually.
Yeah.
And there's some jiu-jitsu gyms that are faith-based, thankfully. But then there's also churches, good churches, bad churches. But let me just be very clear. No matter what church you walk into, you look close enough, you're going to find imperfection.
Yeah.
It's not about being imperfect. I mean, it's not about being perfect. It's about actually being genuine and a continuous effort of trying not to miss the mark, trying to stand up and be who you're supposed to be. The church that I go to, my dad's a pastor. He's been a pastor all my life. And I have had this incredible example because we really went, the point of where we're at in this conversation right now is trust. Who can you trust? How do you trust? And when it comes down to our direction as far as the Bible gives us, is our trust is supposed to be in God, number one. Our trust is supposed to be in God. And in that trusting in God, he gives us peace that passes all understanding. That's something that I really had to learn through my life. I can talk about really more than anything from the experiences that I've had in my life has been mostly business related. I can talk to you about experiences where I put so much trust into individuals that I thought that I could trust, not just trust, but also investment, monetary investment of my time, my energy, my focus, and just getting burned. And I met you at a point in my life where, man, yeah. I'm still recovering and even finding a place where I feel like I can even trust humanity in a healthy level, just because of the amount that I've been burned by people that I thought otherwise I should be able to trust. And with that, I have to think back to all the examples that I've had in my life, being in a pastor's home that has really walked the walk. Because as men, I think that's a very important thing to make sure we don't neglect. If you are genuinely walking this earth and the path that you're supposed to walk, that means walking with God. And that means God walking with you. And that's not always easy. And I'm not trying to over spiritualize the episode. I'm not trying to make it something that the intent's not. I'm just making it very clear and a simple statement that we are on this earth. We are here to have a relationship with God, and then from that relationship with God is where other relationships can begin to make sense and can have an impact that's going to outlive our own lives. But with that, a reason I'm bringing that up is because I have been fortunate and blessed to have an incredible example of a father from my entire life. My dad has been a rock. My dad has not wavered. My dad has not had moral failures. My dad has not been inconsistent. Is he perfect? No. But what I can tell you is in all of my years, all of my life, my dad has remained faithful. He has remained disciplined, which is very important as well to talk about. We can talk about discipline more because that absolutely has a very high priority in being a man, is you have to have discipline to overcome everything else, because discipline is going to be what's more important than motivation, what's more important than inspiration. You got to be disciplined. But my dad has had these attributes that has really impressed on my life and given me hope even in these bad experiences. Why? Because I've seen all my growing up, my dad, my mom, their ministry, investing into people, person after person after person. And then what do people do? More often than not, they fail. I've seen them continue to invest into people that are otherwise just pretty much spitting in their face, whether it's people that they've literally taken from being homeless to being sheltered and then been paying for that shelter and then invested into getting them jobs, and then they turn around, do a complete turnaround and just leave them like they never did anything for them. I've seen these experiences, and let's just give context. So I'm not just So I'm not just talking and talking out of emotion and not giving context as to what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to a specific example that I remember of this individual as a young guy, homeless, came to the church. My dad, my mom poured themselves into this. I was in my earlier teenage years, but I myself remember being a part of trying to help this individual. Got him into shelter, got him into a job, and then just goes off the rails. And not just goes off the rails in just like the way that you don't see him anymore, but like showing up and like starting to pretty much curse in your face, saying, "Oh, you guys are not real. You're not the real deal. This is false. You're a false prophet." Literally on church property, in front of the face. Those kinds of experiences, because that's one example. But I'm telling you, in all my years, if there's one thing that you see in a pastor's home, it is that people are people and people are imperfect and they're going to have failures. I've also seen you got to give context to the other situations too, because I've seen plenty of people that my parents have invested into in their ministry that have flourished. And even if they've had those failures, they've had those moments of weaknesses, and they've fallen short, they've regressed, whatever it may be. I've seen those people that my parents have continued to invest into. And then at some point, they finally get it, and they turn around, and then they have lives now that if you were to talk to them, they would say, "Oh, thank God for sending their ministry into my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that." So I have to make sure that I give honor to those kinds of relationships too, and I'm not just being completely negative. But what I'm saying is I've had these examples in my life to where even whenever they have been burned, even whenever people have failed and given, in my opinion, growing up, in my young and impressionable opinion and easily hot-headed teenage years thinking, what are you doing? You still going to try to invest into this person after they did that, after they said that, after they just gave up, after everything that you've done, all the hours you've spent? But seeing them and their ministry and their perspective turn around and say, no, we weren't doing it because of them. We were doing this because of God. So their investment into people has never been about investing into that individual because of that individual. It's because of their relationship with God and their investment that they know that they've made into the kingdom and that God's made into them. That's the reason that they even have what they have. That's the reason that their ministry has flourished to the point that it's at right now. My parents have been an incredible example in my life as to our trust doesn't start in people. Our trust starts in God.
Sure.
And that's what's given me hope and given me this ability to finally start to put some of the more traumatic or bad experiences that I've had with people, even as recent in just the past few years, into allowing people into my life. You're a good example. Other guys in the jiu-jitsu gym, good example of people that have helped me. But it's definitely been because of that example that's definitely helped me a lot as well. As if you can first place your trust where it belongs, then you have an easier time trusting people that God places in your life.
Sure.
Because I believe that there's something to even just discuss in that if you're truly putting your trust where it belongs, if you're putting your trust in God, which I believe that's got to come first. God's going to place in your life people that you need. So that can be a lot especially for the average listener, maybe hasn't even started on that faith journey. That can be a lot. How do I start with that? How do I start with placing my trust in God? Well, there's a lot to talk about in just that alone. But the point is, let me just give the example of my life, my experience, and we can talk about that more in depth later. But with some of the bad experiences that I've had with people, specifically in business, just this feeling of, man, what am I supposed to do now? How could I ever trust anybody now? I've been to the point before of being like, man, I'll never have another business partner again. I'll never trust people again. But I know that that's not where I'm supposed to operate. It's supposed to be this, instead of that, oh, I've got to completely cut people out. It's no, I have to make sure that I'm putting my trust where it belongs. And I like the quote, I think it's from Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Is that Ronald Reagan? Do you know?
Can't say, but it's a good one.
Trust but verify. And as I have been on this journey of overcoming these frustrations and these trust issues, if you will, with people that have just completely burned businesses, whatever it may be, putting my trust back in God, because sitting in this gym that we're in right now, and I'll tell the story someday, but I wouldn't be here in this gym if it wasn't for me first placing my trust in God, because we reached a point in this gym alone, where I told God and I was wrestling with it, and I said, God, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm ready to completely let it go unless this is truly something that you want for me, because I'm at a point where I don't want it. But if this is what you want, then I'm going to submit myself. I'm going to humble myself, because I want more than what I want. I want what you want. And there's an incredible testimony that goes along with that as to how God really opened up my eyes and opened up the doors for it to be completely revealed that this is what he wanted. And that's why we're sitting here in this gym today, is because of those doors that were open. But that came from trusting in God, because he made it so clear to me that this is what he wanted. I choose to put my trust in that and to continue forward with, we'll get into the details of that maybe at another episode. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But the point is this: because of that, people have entered into my life since then. You're one of them. You're one of the guys that has entered into my life and entered into this circle of trust, if you want to call it that. Not trying to steal anything from, I don't remember the dad's name on Meet the Fockers. Okay. You're not in the circle of trust, yeah. Greg. But there's been people that have come into my life because of this trust in God first, that now I feel like that trust has kind of been repaired, because I put the trust where it belonged in the first place. Yeah. And it's led to here. Right. Is that making any sense, or am I just rambling?
No. Well, yes and no, but rambling in a direction that's absolutely imperative, because people, when we started talking about this, we're talking about what it's like to be a man. So your story, everybody has a story, but your story, I've heard personally, I've seen the end result. People need to know that this was not a little deal that you went through. And without going into all of the context and belaboring something, I think the vast majority of people would have given up. And what's it like to be a man, to forge through that, to lean into his bride, lean into his faith? I don't say this as a butt kiss or blowing sunshine. What you went through was huge. And a lot of people, again, I don't think they would have forged ahead. I know from my past, some of the things that had happened to us, and, financial loss and business trust and stuff you talk about, where our situations mirror each other in some way. And yet here we are. So fortitude, what's it like to be a man? Bootstrap it. You got to get through it. Like in that particular situation, you just have to get through it, but you're also putting your faith out there. And that was a really important piece. When you say, am I rambling? Well, what you put out there was the one thing that I think, and again, this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody else. When I don't trust and I try to handle it myself, the end result usually is not the way that it should go. When I let go and I trust, I often find that at the end of that thing, this thing comes out way different than the way that I suspected or assumed or perceived that it was going to go. And I can say that with a fair amount of confidence, looking back on my life, that's the vast majority of time. That's how that worked out. So when I tell dudes all the time, like, man, if I could just do this, we'd get out of this situation. And I'm like, what if you just trusted and stepped back, partnered with your bride, saw where this thing was going to go, worked together? And I would say the vast majority of those times they came back and said, man, I'm glad you said that. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way. I just want to go out and conquer. And that's what it's like to be a man. We're bred as fighters. That's why John Eldridge, I don't know if you've ever been to any of his retreats over here, typically does them up in the mountains. John does a great job of describing. In fact, I told John after been to a couple of his conferences, told him, I said, this conference that you're doing for dudes right now, you actually should invite the wives in and do the exact same conference, because at the end of the day, what you're doing, you're already showcasing to most of the men what they know innately inside of them, but you're giving them the reasons why they need to be doing it. But in most cases, the women have no idea. They just absolutely have no idea what it's like to be a guy any more than I know what it's like to be a woman. And try as our society is right now with all this gender crap and nonsense that's going on, and, I feel like being a cat tomorrow, you can't change the way you were born. You're a dude or you're a gal, period. At the end of the day, you may not like it, you may not want to be it, but that's how you are, and you're going to be fighting it the rest of your life if you keep trying to go uphill battle. To me, I'd rather embrace it. I'd rather be a guy who is a little bit lost, maybe a little wayward, who needs a little mentor, needs a little counseling, needs somebody good by his side, than constantly fighting what society is telling me to become. And you can go be anything, because you can't. It just doesn't work that way. And we're lost in that. So I started at the beginning. I know a lot of tough guys a lot of bad dudes. I don't know a lot of strong leaders. Right now, we're missing a lot of strong leadership. And your dad's leadership in your life clearly shows through. Clearly. I mean, my dad showed me all the things not to do. My dad was a flipping, raging alcoholic, small town Kentucky, multiple affairs, abusive to me, abusive to my mom. And I mean badly abusive, not a little bit abusive. Died at 47 years of age, cirrhosis of the liver, drank himself to death, never could keep a job, never sustained, never led ever in his life that I know of. And the sad reality of it is all of the dumb, bad choices he made actually in some way were positive to me as an end result of what not to do in my life. I was able to look back and go, well, alcoholism's bad. Don't do that. Abuse is bad. Don't do that. Fill in the blank. So I'm in some ways, not because I wanted my dad to be that kind of guy, and not because I'm appreciating bad traits, but it did rub off in a positive to me to be able to look back and go, if I'm going to hold accountability in my life, I'm going to use him as an example of what not to be, so that I can help mentor other dudes that might be going through one of those things and say, hey, here's what it was like living on the other side of that. Because people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. I remember the things that my dad made me feel to this day. At 56 years of age, I've outlived him almost by 10 years now. I remember the bad things. I remember the good things, and there were very few, but I remember those emotions, and I remember the scars. I don't necessarily remember the things he said. I don't even really remember the things he did, but I remember the feeling that came from it. So I would say, from a standpoint of how we're wired and what's it like to be a man, I never learned even how to share what I just shared with you up until just a few years ago with other guys when I started doing this mentor thing. And that all came from when I broke down and finally revealed sodomy happened as a kid. And then all of a sudden, I'm speaking on this stuff and guys are coming forth going, dude, your story is my story. Like everything you're saying is like verbatim what I went through. And it is amazing when you see guys go through that. And again, I'll say this one more time. Who have you talked to about this? Just you. Nobody. My wife doesn't know. My pastor doesn't know. My brother doesn't know. My parents don't know. And it's like, man, you've got to go talk to some people and get this out and open up. And then you see that guy a year later and his wife is, they're arm in arm, hand in hand. She comes up and gives you a hug and she says, you have no idea what you did for my husband. The walls that have come down because we were literally on the edge of a divorce and he was angry and he was pissed off at life and he was working hard and doing all this stuff, but he was disconnected and there was no relationship. And now all of the sudden he's become a different human being. It is amazing when you take a demon out of your soul, get it off your chest, or an addiction. And we just, as guys, we're just not good at that. We're not. We hide and we hide. I just read a story. I don't know who the dude was, but he was in his DC Talk, Newsboys, Christian band. He comes out 20-year history of banging 8 balls and infidelity and gay things and stuff. I mean, this is a dude who was on top of the world by every measure in a Christian environment, by every measure, just as broken and sinful as any other dude. I know guys that I've worked undercover with guys in motorcycle gangs that probably were living better lives than that guy was living. And that's a pretty powerful statement in and of itself, because he either didn't know where to go or he compartmentalized it down to the point that he didn't know what to do with it. And now when it comes out, there may be shame and guilt, but I'll bank everything I got twice over that guy right now to this day and time probably feels like 5 gorillas got up off his chest. And he's probably feeling a freedom he has never felt in his life because he's been battling this internal, I got to keep this down. I got to keep it suppressed. I got to keep it hidden. I don't want the world to know. And if he's married on the other side of it, his bride doesn't know what to do with that because she doesn't know what she's dealing with. She has no idea the depths of darkness that he's in. And we as men are really good at hiding that stuff. We're just really good. And I don't think it's because we want to. I think it's the way we're wired. I just genuinely believe dudes want to be seen and respected and revered. So then when they're doing something stupid or bad, they're afraid of whether the world's going to see them, right? But you got to check yourself in the mirror every day, in my opinion. I can't tell people how to live, but I know when I look in the mirror what I see. I know my thoughts. I know my feelings. I know my conscience. Everybody on the planet does that. It's just, how do you contend with it? Are you surrounding yourself with the right people? Are you going to it? I know I'm probably belaboring that, but I really do believe your point. And who do you surround yourself with and who do you trust matters. And I will say this is what it's like being on the other side. You shared your story. This is super short. I shared with Jana, my bride, years after sodomy, well into our marriage. She was the first person I talked to about it. The second person I talked to about was my pastor at our church. Was my pastor. I went and I sat down and I said, I got to talk to somebody, a dude, right? This is someplace that I worked, somebody I trusted, somebody I've had hundreds of hours of conversations with. He was the first guy to not only fail me, but he was the first guy to throw me under the bus when I found out about his affair. And at the end of the day, I'm like, I trusted you with maybe the darkest thing I've ever been through in my life, and you used me. And there were times where I just wanted to get into the car, drive over to his door, kick in the door, drag him out of the house, and just beat him half to death in his kitchen. I was so ticked off I couldn't see straight. But instead of doing that, I sought help. I went to somebody that I trusted, somebody else, and I said, here's my feeling. And they're like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know I can't do it, but that's the feeling I got, right? My wife didn't understand that feeling completely. The other guys understood that completely. They got it. But they talk you off the ledge and they slow you down, and then you end up going, I'm just going to let go of this. I'm going to forgive him. But I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I could spit against a hurricane wind, because at the end of the day, he's done it multiple times. And now I found out about it, and I go, you know what? If he wants to do that in life, got to hold him to a higher standard. I don't need to hold him to any standard at this point in time. And I can tell you, once I took that approach, it was free. It was easy for me to let that go. I still remember it. I will still not trust him. But at the end of the day, whether I see him again or not, I don't wish ill on him. I don't think anything about it. I just here you go.
I think that's a really good example to kind of point people in the right direction, because there can be a lot of anxiety, even in just what we've talked about. Well, why would I talk to anybody? Because the examples you guys keep giving are people who turn around and betray your trust and beat you down. So I think that's a really good example, because you still told him, and it still had a benefit in that you were able to talk to somebody. And so I think that the point that I'm getting at is talking to somebody. If it ends up being the wrong person down the road, you'll deal with it. But you've made that first step of telling somebody. You know what it's like to get it off of your chest. And the right people, I firmly believe, will come if you put your trust where it belongs. And I'm always going to go back to my faith, because I firmly believe if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Sure.
My entire life, now more than ever, my entire life, I have to make sure that I am not just talking the talk. I have to walk the walk. Faith is what my life is founded upon and will be founded upon the rest of my life. I'm sold out.
I want to add something to that, because I want to clarify for anybody that's listening. Let me just, because if I painted the picture poorly, I'll look into the camera and say apologies. But I want to clarify. I'm talking on a personal interaction level. So you're correct. We've talked about some things that were bad. We trusted in something and it didn't go well. Some of it was church-based. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it is, with zero embellishment, I worked at a mega church after retiring from law enforcement, went in as director of security, did a ton of executive protection. A lot of big name people come through the church, senators that went there, the amount of side jobs that I ended up doing in that world, and people I'm connecting with in SF in running all over the world with some of these guys training. I share that to say this. I could count on less than two hands in my, let's call it my adult life. So from sodomy on, let's call it 50 years. I can count on less than two hands the amount of people that have absolutely railroaded my life. I know thousands of people and have had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of interactions that all go great. And it goes back to the law enforcement analogy, 102 million calls for service nationwide. And we have 18-ish questionable officer-involved shootings out of 1,004, 864 justified in this particular year. I look my life the same way. I've been on earth thousands and thousands of days, had hundreds of thousands of interactions. All have been amazing or positive or wonderful or good with no bad byproduct. But of the handful of people that I'm talking about that I personally knew that routed me, did something to my family, hurt me, less than 10 people in my whole life. And I think that ratio is pretty flippin' amazing, because if I was going off of living in the world of, say, social media and an influencer and my my life was built in and around solely that type of drive. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying if that was the case, you would have tens of thousands of people saying something bad about you all the time if they disagreed with you. You would constantly be, I couldn't imagine the amount of flack Ben Shapiro takes. Like, I can't even imagine. Now, he's very opinionated. He says what he says and he stands on his beliefs. But I'm talking about personal relationships. I'm looking at the people I've literally known in my life, less than 10. And I'm including my own dad. I'm including my grandparents in that. I'm including my pastor that did that to me. So we're talking a very limited number. I'm not talking about somebody who let you down in the moment. I'm talking about people that legitimately, intentionally, knowingly, willingly did what they did unapologetically, never cared, never apologized. Less than 10. That's not a bad ratio in life, because I've got some dudes in my life that by the hundreds that if I called them today and said, I need you in 5 minutes, would be 5 minutes, no questions asked. Be like that movie In the Town. You ever seen that where he walks in and he says, we're going somewhere, we're going to hurt some people, but you can never ask me about it. We can never talk about it again.
I've seen that. Jake Gyllenhaal, right? Who else was that?
Ben Affleck and
Ben Affleck. Not Jake Gyllenhaal. Was it his little brother, Casey Affleck?
No, it was dude that got run over with a snow machine.
Jeremy
Renner.
Jeremy Renner.
And Jeremy Renner looks at it and goes, whose car are we taking? Right? Like there's a bond in that moment. And it's he's going over there to kick the crap out of somebody. But what I like about it is when you've served with dudes, they know your integrity, you know their integrity, you know you're not going to step over a line, but they're going to be there for you in a second. That is the kind of people that I want in my life. And not everybody's going to be that person. So I don't put everybody in that circle. I put a handful of dudes in that circle. My bride is in that circle. The guys that have the keys to the kingdom. So if I'm dead and gone today, there's 2 dudes that have everything that we own secure, offsite. Nobody will ever get to it. Nobody will ever know who they are. And Jana's taken care of. My kids are taken care of for the rest of their life. And, you know, when we go back to the beginning of this, it's understanding a man. That's part of understanding a man. I did that as protection for my family. And I gave that to another dude that was going to, or a couple dudes that are going to take care of my family, meaning they're safe, they're secure. I don't have to worry when I'm dead and gone that they're handled. And understanding what that's like to be a man, I'm guessing if Jana was telling that same story, it would be a very different story. It would have a very different sound to it. She would set it up differently. She would look at it differently. And I'll give you a quick example. So our little girl, so she went to the Naval Academy, graduated last year. She is now on her first deployment. She's got the con on the ship. She's on the USS Tripoli. And she, from an expectation level, we had very little when she went in because we didn't know what we didn't know. But from an appreciation, value, respect level, I revere my daughter right now because my baby girl at 23 years of age is driving an amphibious, vertical launch aircraft carrier to Japan right now. 8 years ago, she was debating whether she wanted to do shot put or play viola or who was going to be her friend in school. And right now, she's going to be in the South China Sea in one of the most controversial, volatile areas on the planet. And I'm trusting the freedom of the United States of America to the XO and to the captain of that ship, to the United States Navy, but also in part to my baby girl right now. And that, for me, what's it like to be a man with a daughter who is on a ship of 850 dudes and 50 gals? Do I have nervousness? You better believe I do. Do I have worries? You better believe I do. I have to trust in that. But I shared that story to say this. When they sailed out of port, out of San Diego, B-Dock, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it's been now, headed to Pearl Harbor to head to Japan. When they came by, here's the difference between men and women. Here's how men feel, or I felt, versus what Jana felt. Jana was out there filming as the ship. We're elevated. We're at about 400 feet above. We're up at Point Loma, San Diego. We're looking down. Here comes the Tripoli around the corner. Prior to that, I don't know what SEAL team ran the channel, but they're running in go fast boats. They clear the channel, fly over from Blackhawks. SEALs come back through. Then here comes the Tripoli. Here comes more SEALs. Here comes another flyover. Here comes F-35 flyovers. The boat has to go safely out to the ocean, right? Like we have to be aware of all things. And as a dad, as a man, my reaction was, man, I am grateful that we've got dudes who hung it on the line, entered the Navy, entered and went through buds, got stacked on a boat, went out on a go fast to go clear a channel so that my baby girl can be safe, leaving a port in America to go to a dangerous port somewhere else. Jana's reaction as a woman was tears. Look at my little girl. I wonder if she's standing out on the deck waving to us. Oh my gosh, do you think? And, you know, so her emotions, her reactions were so different than mine. And yet we both were concerned for our baby girl. We both have the feelings of wanting her protected and safe. But I'm looking at it logistically, internalizing, because I know the back end of what it takes to make an op like that happen, as to where she's looking at it going, what do you think they're going to have for dinner tonight? And I love that, because the counterbalance between those two things is she's looking at, I want her to be safe. I want her to be well fed. I want her to be taken care of. I want her to be all of these things. I'm looking at it going, I want her to be able to protect herself at all costs, no matter what happens. And that's what it's like to be a guy. You're a warrior, and you hope that your now warrior daughter is going to be able to step up. And I have complete confidence in her, but be able to step up and protect herself, protect her body, protect her heart from, you know, dudes that are going to be looking at her on the boat. Jana is wanting to go to Japan to visit her so that we can go walk around Japan together as a family. And I find that fascinating. I just find that fascinating.
Sounds like that'll be a fun trip for you guys here sometime soon. But going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, and with some of the points that you made, and specifically about your circle, and that really comes down to, well, there's a lot of people that might be listening that don't have that circle, that they can have those people that they've busted down doors with. Some people don't live that life.
True.
You know? So my circle would be, obviously, I've already said, jiu-jitsu, some church people in the mix there. But make no mistake that if you don't have a circle yet, you can build your circle. And I think that it's important, just like you kind of made known, clarified, the bad experiences with people you've had, it's outweighed by the good experiences.
Oh, it's very limited.
I would say the same thing about my experience. But here's the thing. Just the same way that we've talked about the world really grabbing onto that negativity. You've got 102 million service calls. You grab onto just a couple, and that's what the world focuses on. I feel like even just as men, and I feel like that's just kind of a lot of times, even on just an individual level, we just focus and dwell on those negative experiences. We kind of let it eat us up. I've definitely been guilty of that. Like, I've had incredible interactions with the majority of people that have been in my life. I've had good relationships, good friendships. Those are far outweighing the bad experiences. But the bad experiences just have this way of just seeping in and just making you just focus on that. And I think that's important to talk about, because there has to be this conversation that you and me are having to make people just even realize, make whoever's listening realize, and even just make me realize in this conversation that you got to hit a point where you don't let those negative experiences continue to weigh you down in a way that's going to affect your life negatively. Why? Because number one, it's not going to get you anywhere. Number two, you're giving power to a negative situation that you don't need to be giving power to in your life. You should be releasing that and focusing on the positivity. In a biblical sense, you'd be focusing on gratitude. What do you have to be thankful for? The good experiences should be what you give more credit to. But I think that there's a lot to just talk about in just the idea of, well, these negative experiences, for whatever reason, it's just a perspective thing. It's like if you're holding something up to your face, you can't see anything past. So even though it's smaller than this whole room, you're holding it up to your face, and it's just like that's the only thing you see. You put it down, and whoa, this whole room exists. And that's the way that I feel like a lot of negative experiences in life seem to be. It's like you had this negative experience, whether it was a relationship, whether it was your job, whether it was, I don't know, just a bad day, whether it was a traumatic call. And that seems to just have a way of creeping into our minds, into our being as just this big, immense thing. And a lot of times as men, we really focus, and I have a little bit of a problem of overthinking. And you would
at least you're not critical.
we've kind of talked a little bit about, like, whenever we really focus on something. For instance, just this podcast, getting this set up, the equipment, the investment into the equipment. I really went down a deep dive into researching what do I need to get? What do I need to buy? What works the best? What's going to work in this setting? What's going to be the easiest way to change this setting? How do we automate some of these processes? Late nights, YouTube videos, ChatGPT, Google searches, just using that as an analogy of these kind of almost compulsive behaviors of just kind of starting to really overthink some of the details. I think that same kind of an idea, that same kind of what we're expressing in that being obsessive, that can sometimes apply in a very unhealthy way to negative experiences. We start to play these things over in our mind over and over and over. Man, that could have been so different. Man, if I just wouldn't have done this. Man, if I would have just acted this way or not trusted that person and did this instead. And we can really start to let the past start to eat us alive. And I think that there's a lot to be said in that, is whenever you start to just talk about it, like for me, just talking about some of the things that I've been through with people that I know I can trust it with, people like you that have something to relate with me about. You've been through your own battles. In every man, in every person's sense, whether they are law enforcement or not, finding somebody to relate with, finding some common ground is very important to start to build your circle. So with me, jiu-jitsu being that circle and church being that circle, that's me, that's fine. But there could be your circle just at your job, at your hobby, whatever you do at church. Building your circle is just a matter of finding common ground with somebody to be able to start a conversation and be able to talk about, hey, I've had this negative experience. It's really been weighing on my mind lately, and I'm trying to get over it. Just to be able to have a conversation where, in my mind, this entire conversation, it's been, we've had a lot of talks about negative experiences with people, and for me, I was getting worried, well, people are going to think, well, I'm supposed to talk to somebody, but then who am I supposed to talk to? And then you point out, well, hold on, let's qualify this. I've had the good experiences outweigh the bad experiences. That's an important qualifier, because whenever you said that, it makes me realize in my situation, oh yeah, you're right. My situation isn't that bad either. Most of my experiences have been good, not bad. And just this conversation, I feel bettered because of it. And the whole point of me even saying this, and the point that I'm trying to make, is find somebody to talk to. Start building your circle, because that circle is going to be very important whenever you have this weight. Because you might even have not have this weight we're talking about today, but at some point in your life, you're going to have something that goes wrong or feels heavy, and you're going to feel like you're all alone. But the truth is that you're not.
So from a what's it like to be a guy perspective with what you just asked, so bad, I think in general, I think we said this in the podcast. If we didn't, I know we said it offline. You could have 100 good reviews on your gym, one bad review, and that's what people focus on. That's what you're going to focus on. Like, oh man, what happened, right? Did you forget the other 100 things that went well to focus on the one? Because as men, we're fixers. We're just naturally fixers. We want to streamline everything all the time. We want to rescue. We want to protect. We want to do things. So I think it's very simple, just from an analogous standpoint, to look at that and go, well, I want to fix that one thing. I want to fix it, right? So I'm not going to go spend $1 million and build a house, finish the whole house, call it our dream house. Just call it, oh, man, this is my retirement. This is my thing. And then go up and drill a 3-inch hole in the roof and leave it. 6 months later, it's going to rain. It's going to mold. It's going to come to the drywall. I'm going to destroy $1 million house if I leave a 3-inch hole up there. Of course, I'm going to fix it, right? It's like driving down the road and there's a pothole. You drive through it every day. Hello, C-Dot at Profoot Valley and Founders. 3 years. I've been driving over the same datgum potholes. Like, nobody has patch repair. It drives me nuts, because I look at it and I go, I've got to avoid that so I don't destroy my vehicle. I've got to constantly avoid that. The good news is the rest of the roadway flows smooth. So am I grateful for the rest of the roadway that I'm driving on, that's smooth, that's maintained, that's plowed, that's taken care of? Or am I focused on that one bump? So it is not a bump, it's a pothole. But I know now where to avoid it. I know what part of the lane to pick up. I've been doing it for so long, it's muscle memory. I can do it at nighttime. I can drive over the top of it. But I think the example is simple, is we're going to focus on the bad. And I wanted to do a reminder that life's not bad. life's what you make of it. Life is good. Now, if you're a Debbie Downer and you're always looking at stuff through a negative lens and you're constantly just waiting for the bad to fall and Chicken Little and all that crap, yeah, you're going to have a pretty rough life. And I know some dudes that can't get out of their own way from making bad decisions over and over and over because everything they perceive is the world stacked against them. Well, go back and look at some of your choices too. I mean, you've got to be, if we're going to be men, let's be men and call stuff out. The reality is I've done some pretty dumb things in my life and I've had some guys come back and smack me in the back of the head and go, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Do you not realize who you're married to? Do you not realize how good, and when you start having somebody else hold you to account, which I think is your point, find somebody you trust in, it's way easier when you're struggling to pick up the phone and go, hey, I can tell you on the receiving end, if I've got a dude, so I'll go negative to positive. If I got a dude that pings me every 3 weeks with the same problem, and for 6 months he's got the same problem, but in a different format, but it's the same common denominator, I am not doing that guy any service at all. I'm doing nothing for that guy. If he feels that he can pick up and just keep venting to me all of his problems, I'm just a sounding board to a guy who's not fixing any of his problems. So I'm not helping him. He's not helping me. That's silly. That's my take. If I've got a guy who's going through something and he says, man, I don't know what to do. Can we sit down and talk? And you see this guy making quick graduated steps, figuring things out. Circle of friends is there for him. Family life is getting better. You see him striving. You're going to be his biggest cheerleader. You're going to be there every step of the way to make sure that guy gets through it. So the point you've made multiple times during this conversation is surround yourself with somebody that you trust. Find somebody that you can lean into. I'm a big believer of the number 3 in the Bible, the number 7 in the Bible is there for a reason multiple times. If you're going to go in with a trust factor with 1, go in with a trust factor with 2, because it's kind of like having a board and a nonprofit. You always want to have an off number of leaders that are controlling that board of that nonprofit, be 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever it is. I don't want an even amount where something is split. I want a decision maker that's going to make a choice if something is divided. And I would say that that's very, very important in life too. I don't go one-on-one with everybody. Sometimes I invite somebody else in just to be a sounding board or just to listen. And this could be a business idea, an endeavor we're looking at. It could be something that's problematic. It could be something that somebody's going through with their kid and they're asking for advice or wisdom. The point is, surround yourself with 2 good people in all serious situations, and you're going to find you're probably going to have an answer pretty quick as to what needs to be done, be it you, somebody else. So I hope I answered that, but I would say the vast majority of our time is spent focused, sadly, on the negative or the fix-it problem because of the way we're wired as dudes, as to where my wife focuses very little on the negative, if at all. She just focuses on the positive. She'll come home and bake. She's gotten into this whole sourdough thing where you do the starter kit. She's been doing this for months. I bet my wife, unembellished, just made 400 loaves of bread in the last 6 months. I look at it through the lens of, what's it costing? How much time is it taking? Is it distracting from us? And what a selfish thing for me to do, because the joy she gets out of it actually brings joy back into us and it brings joy to other people. But if I just look at it through what is it costing? That's a pretty crappy thing to do, especially when everybody's like, this is the best bread I've ever had in my life. Can we have another? Can we have another? Can we have another? And Jana gets joy out of that. She does it with jam. She does the same thing. So I think it's perspective. I think it comes down to we as men are wired in a Tetris-y way to where we fix it, make it fit. Then we want to be respected for making it fit. And when it doesn't fit, we get frustrated and we want to lash out or we want to push back or we want to do something, as to where my bride will be like, I don't care if it fits. We'll just make it work.
That goes both ways, ladies. What you just said about the jam, sorry, not the jam. She makes jam too, by the way, if you didn't know that. But sourdough, that goes both ways. So whenever your husband or your boyfriend's wanted to go train jiu-jitsu, remember, it's going to be doing him more good for him and for your marriage, all right? Don't worry about the cost. Yep. Don't worry about the time. Just give him his time for jiu-jitsu. It's going to be good. And I know some couples even train jiu-jitsu, so that's even better. That's pretty cool. I have not been able to successfully convince my wife to try jiu-jitsu, and I never will, and I've given up on that. But that's okay. She has her things. I have mine, and we make it
you know
work.
what? That actually, for what it's like to be a man, that's actually a good thing. I do believe, through my experience, I'll speak only for me, I'm a hockey guy. I've been playing my whole life. Started when I was 8, had my tryouts, did my things. I play mostly what they call beer leagues now, but it's a high level. I've got a lot of national tournaments I play in. I got one coming this weekend. Jana gives me the space to do that, and she comes and she supports me. We, by comparison, Jana loves to jam. We'll take a road trip to Oregon to go pick blueberries and blackberries together. I mean, literally drive to Oregon to go do that for like 3 days. Our bond time is amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. So we get to come back. Jana gets to fulfill it. She's making stuff. She creates 200-300 jars of jam with this literally tons of berries that we bring back. Edify, love, give, encourage. What's it like to be a guy in that scenario? I get to see my wife smile and be happy. And I know that I'm being a good steward of my time, my finances. And at the same time, I get to protect her. We get to go out there together and we get to bond. I think guys need that with their wives. I think wives need it with their husbands. But I think single people that are going through stuff or they're looking to date or they're trying to find, you got to find common ground with the other person. It can't be just one-sided. It can't be just all about you. It can't be all just about them. You got to find what makes each other tick and how you support each other. Because guys feel differently than women about things. Not everything, but most things. That's been my life experience. Most guys feel differently than their other halves. And in all fairness, some guys feel differently than guys feel about things. Some guys will look at me and go, dude, I'm a CPA. I like numbers. I would never go stand in front of a bullet. I'm glad guys like you exist. And I'm like, well, I'm grateful that you could do my taxes for me because I'm an idiot and I don't want to be, I got to trust in you. So there's gives and takes even with dudes on how we do things. But I still think that the common denominator in most cases is we compartmentalize, we stuff down, and we don't always know how to deal with our emotions. Our other halves don't always understand that. Our peers don't always understand that. And even if they do understand it, sometimes it's situational, and the thing you're going through is very different. Because me working a really, really bad trauma situation with a kid involved, and you've never experienced that as another guy, I got to go to somebody in that circle of friends that understands what that's like so that we can debrief each other and hot wash this thing and get it off the table. I can't just go to Dave, who's the CPA, and go, hey, you wouldn't believe what happened, because all I'm doing is sharing with something. He's going to be like, what? That's terrible. I mean, yesterday on my way home, I drove past motorcycle versus car, high rate of speed. Dude, he totaled the car. There was nothing left of the bike, and he was about 90 feet from where the bike was laying. I mean, this was a bad scenario, right? I'm very, very grateful that we have emergency responders that are going to show up. We have a system that is in place, that they're there, they're Johnny on the spot, they're taking care of it, but they're going to see something that most people would have never seen. And that's something they go home with. And whether or not they deal with it or don't deal with it, that comes out in the wash. But I can tell you, for most people, I saw it was all over social media last night. Anybody drove by it, people were freaking out over that. The guys on scene, they can't freak out. You got to deal with that. And that's what it's like to be a guy. You got to deal with it in the moment. We'll deal with the emotions later, but you got to handle it.
I agree. And in talking about being a man, carrying what we have to carry as men, I think it's really important. I mean, we've obviously spoken a little bit to marriage because we are married, and the Bible has some pretty good instructions on marriage and being the husband you're supposed to be and being the father you're supposed to be. But from context of just man, so that we are able to start to work this thing toward a close. Just talking about being a man, and this will apply to anybody becoming a man. I think it's very important that we make sure that everybody knows that even though we've really talked about faith, we've incorporated faith. I've incorporated my faith in a lot of what I've had to say. I'm not saying that there's sunshine and rainbows if you just all of a sudden turn your life and you believe in God. Do I believe that it'll get better? Absolutely, yes. No doubt. Whenever you're living your life without a purpose, whenever you're living your life without an aim, without an end goal, I don't believe that it's very easy to have a life that really is being lived the way that it's supposed to, because we're on this earth for a point.
And we're seeing it right now politically, and this is the only thing that I'll draw into it. You're seeing it right now with 100 million people in this country. I mean, what you just said is actually very profound. No purpose, no direction, no course, emotional reaction, and it's just wayward. It's wayward. And I know that's another conversation, but right now we're living it in real time. And it's unfolding faster than we can keep up with it.
No way to live. You can't expect to live your life without something to be rooted in, without something to be your mission, to be your purpose. You have to have a purpose. We're on this planet with a purpose. And if we live without a purpose, then we're living life completely aimlessly. And of course, things are going to go wrong. Of course, we're going to feel like that we're alone. Of course, we're going to feel like we have nobody to talk to. But my heart definitely goes out to anybody who is struggling. My heart goes out to the family that you mentioned you're friends with the loss recently. A really good example that I've had in my life the past couple of years has been Tom DeBlas. And if anybody listening knows who that is, he is somebody who has a very large following online, largely due to the martial arts community. but I have seen firsthand this guy will go out of his way to respond to direct messages from pretty much anybody. And the amount of messages that he gets, and he'll constantly, he'll feel this, he feels this burden about it, because he'll post about it pretty often, saying, guys, I really try to get to all my messages. If I don't get to you, it's not because I don't care. I'm really sorry if I don't get to you. I'm trying to get through them. He genuinely makes a point to take time out of his day to see if people are asking him for help. He reaches out. He helps people with bullied kids. He connected somebody here in Aurora that there's a whole case that's been going on. It's an autistic kid that was abused by his teacher's aide, and there's a whole case going on criminally. But he got them in touch with me, and we began private lessons with this kid. And that's all because Tom DeBlas and how much he actually cares about people. And the reason I'm bringing that in to this conversation is because of this. You may feel like you have nobody to talk to. You may feel like you have nobody that cares about you. And that is the absolute opposite of what your life is supposed to be like. And that is the entire purpose of really why me and you even want to be on a platform at all, why we even want to be talking about any of this stuff. I am nobody special. And I think that, Micah, you would agree that we're not acting like we have all the answers to life. I'm certainly not ever going to give that impression. But what I do have is 2 ears, and I am willing to listen. I'm willing to be there in as much capacity as I can be. And sometimes that's really, as men, we've already kind of spoken to a couple of examples in our own lives, but sometimes just being able to have somebody to listen to you, just being able to open up and get it off of your chest, that really can go a long way. And so I want to make sure that anybody who's listening, and hopefully you know this about me if you already know me personally, but I'm here. If you need anything, if you just want to talk, if you want to vent, you're not alone. You're not alone. And I know that there's support systems. There's plenty of other people out there to talk to, and that's great. I encourage anybody and everybody to go out and talk to somebody. If you're going through something, if you're struggling, don't be ashamed and don't be afraid to just start having a conversation and be honest with yourself and where you're at, because that is the way that we're designed to live. Not to feel like we have to live in secrecy, not to feel like we have to be so ashamed that we could never admit to anybody what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we've been through. Start the conversation. Be honest with yourself and be honest with somebody else. That's going to lead to you beginning to live the life that you're supposed to live. You're not supposed to be living in secrecy. You're not supposed to be living with this weight, with guilt, with shame, whatever it might be. You're not supposed to be living with all this bottled up and suppressed and hidden. You got to get it off of your chest. And I just want to make sure to say that. But in all of that, I got to get back to the point that I was making, and that is that I'm not saying that God is just some blue pill you can take and your life just becomes sunshine and rainbows. That's not me. I'm just going to speak for myself. I know, Micah, you're going to be able to speak for yourself as well. But God is not some genie in a bottle.
Right.
And a very important part of this discussion, especially as we're starting to get toward a close here, is that part of being a man is enduring suffering. Look at what Jesus did. And it's scriptural. 2 Timothy 2:3, I have it pulled up right here. And that is, it says, join me in suffering as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. Mm-hmm. So literally, our calling as men, we're going to suffer. I mean, think about it. If anybody who's saying that if you just come to Jesus, that your life is just going to be easy, that's completely false. That's a false premise.
Yeah, it is.
The apostles, the disciples who literally followed Jesus, out of everybody there was 12, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that they had horrific deaths. They had to suffer. Now, was it worth it? Absolutely. The promise of blessing and prosperity, I believe that absolutely God causes us to prosper in this life. I believe that God blesses us, but I also believe that we are going to have our trials. We're going to have what we have to walk through. We're going to have suffering that's going to lead us to become closer to God. Why? Because that's what Christ did. When we call ourselves Christians, that means we're Christ-like. Well, look at Christ's life. Look at the example that he laid for us. He didn't just have this cushy life that he really, in all honesty, he could have had coming into this world. He could have been at the top of the top of the top. He could have been the king. He could have been the one who was sitting on top of the throne and just had this easy life, had servants, had slaves, had anybody doing anything he wanted for him. But he came and set this example for us of serving humanity, so much to the point that he literally gave his life in one of the most gruesome ways that he possibly could, being crucified on the cross. He suffered through that for us. That is the ultimate example of manhood. And that is why we're here today even talking about any of this. That's why if you look at our logo for the Daily Carry, it's not just a gun and a knife. That's not just what we're talking about, but there's a cross there. Why? Because as manly and as bad, as cool as it is to be carrying a gun, to be trained to go down kicking doors with people and have those stories, to see a man doing manly stuff, hitting a boxing bag, rolling, tapping somebody out, as cool as that is, you have to be able to bring it back to this perspective. There is nothing more manly than Jesus carrying that cross for all of mankind.
Right.
Paying that debt for all of mankind to this day. That is the best example that we have of what it is to be a man. And that is to endure that suffering because you know it's not about you. You're not on this planet to serve yourself. You're on this planet with a purpose.
Yeah, you got to die to yourself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pick up your cross daily.
Yeah. No, that's well
Deny
stated.
yourself.
It's very well stated. It's a very good ending to an important day, an important topic. And again, forgive my emotions and what got me here today, but it doesn't change any of the stuff we talked about. And in the end, here's this is something I've not conveyed, and I've had a little bit of time to process while we've been talking. Honestly, I've just been reflecting right now. There is a piece of me right now that is very pissed off. I'm very, very mad because there was another option. There's always somebody. There's always an opportunity, and I'm hurt. I'm devastated for the family. I'm lost. I'm not even sure what to say right now or if I even should say anything. But when push comes to shove, I'm also mad because I know that there was something that was missed somewhere, internally, externally, whatever it was, to get in front of that. And I will say often, I've put it out in post, be careful. You never know what somebody's going through. Watch your words, because you don't know what they're suffering from. There's another side of that. You also know what you're saying might be the last thing that pushes somebody over the edge. And it's not your job to know that, but it's your job in what you do and how you carry yourself. There's enough examples out there that we all know. It's very easy, I think. It's very easy to go after what you don't understand and criticize it without actually understanding it and make it about you or make it about entitlement. But there's a human somewhere on the other side of this, or there's a family on the other side of this, and their emotions right now, their world is rocked. The things that they're going to deal with is almost unfathomable to me at this point in time. So, prayers, loving thoughts to the family. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I sat here for 2 hours not thinking that I'm mad inside, that I didn't get in front of it, or I didn't know what to do, or I wasn't aware. And I don't have answers to any of those right now, but that's a very real feeling for me. And I've been trying to stuff it down during the show while talking about we stuff stuff down. I don't want to be a walking contradiction, but this isn't the time to go through it. It's just the time for me to reflect that I've got these feelings inside. I got to figure out what to do with them. And I don't know those next steps, but it's definitely going to be with somebody.
That's got to be one of the hardest things to navigate. I've had in my few years friends that have passed way earlier than they should. I've been friends with those who have had situations that have had those people who have taken their own lives and made that decision. And I've not been in a position where you are, where it's been somebody that I've served with and somebody that I've really done life with that has made that decision. But I can only imagine the weight. I do have friends. I do have even students here at the gym that have opened up and shared some similar experiences to that. And at the end of the day, there still has to be this understanding, because as men, the first thing we want to do is say, what could I have done? And
I want to fix it.
You want to fix it. And that can become such a weight if we're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure that's got to be the way that the entire family's feeling. I mean, that was somebody's son, somebody's family member, whatever the relation might be. But at the end of the day, we have to be careful, especially in these instances. not to take on too much weight, because as much as we want to fix it right now, what can we do? All that matters is what can we do, and that is we can love the family, pray for the family, hope that we learn, just like you've talked about swerving around that pothole. Well, who could I reach out to today that I haven't heard from for a while?
Yeah.
What could I do to maybe try to stop this from happening again? But at the end of the day, we can only do what we can do. And I keep saying at the end of the day, I've got to kind of dial that back maybe a little bit. But what I'm getting at is that I remember having a conversation with somebody who came and confided in me about a death. And he felt responsible. And he just kept relaying to me that I feel this guilt. Like, I had this conversation with him. I felt like I was supposed to have this conversation with him. And I asked him, I said, did you have that conversation? I said, yeah, I did. He said, yeah, I did. I had that conversation with him where I told him he was going down the wrong road and it was going to lead him somewhere. And this person, he passed away, I believe, from an overdose. So I don't think that it was intentional. From the details that I know, it wasn't. But this person who was confiding in me said, I feel responsible. And my immediate response, not because I have any answers, not because I'm anybody special, but I truly believe in the scripture that says that the Holy Spirit will bring things to your remembrance. And I really believe that means that if your intentions are where they're supposed to be and you've got a relationship with God, that God will help you. If your intention truly is, I want to be there for somebody, I think that God gives us help in these situations, because it just came to mind to just make sure the conversation, as a man myself trying to help another man, I felt the weight of, well, he shouldn't be carrying this weight. How can I convey this to him in a way that he's going to understand that? And what came to mind just completely, like, I never thought about it, but you can't control people, and that's not the intent. That's not why we're on this world. We're not here to control people. People are going to make the decisions that they're going to make. So I tell them, well, God literally put Adam and Eve in a garden and told them, just don't eat from this tree. That's it. Don't eat from this tree. It couldn't have been more clear. It couldn't have been more specific. Don't eat from this tree. That's it. And they still fail. They still made that choice. So you still had this conversation with this person. You did what you felt like you were supposed to do. At the end of the day, they had their free will to make their decision from there. And I get it. We're still going to feel guilty. We're still going to feel this weight of, I could have done more. I should have done more. But we are all human. We can only do what we can do. But what we can do is have these conversations. And where me and you have had this conversation, hopefully we inspire others to have this conversation. And hopefully just by having these conversations, we can start to see an impact on people's lives where there's less of this pain, less of this hurt, less of this feeling like we're completely alone, less of this feeling like I have no other choice but to go to this extreme because I'm so misunderstood. I'm so messed up. I'm so alone that this is all I can do. That is such a lie. And we talked about lies on the last episode, but it's a lie. That's not the way that you're intended to live your life.
I think it's fear. I think the lie, devil gets a foothold, evil gets a foothold, fear sets in, and then there you are. You're stuck in that box. And fear is powerful. Fear will stymie a lot, right? I mean, I could sit here and give example after example of people that I have interviewed as a victim and gone, in my head, I'm like, why didn't you just, right? Fill in the blank. I don't say it out loud, but it was fear. It was fear. It encapsulated them and doesn't differentiate men from women. As strong as men are, we get stymied, paralysis by analysis, staring, going, man, I'm afraid to do anything. And that's definitely true when it's internal. It's definitely true when you know you're looking in the mirror, your conscience is saying, dude, what were you thinking? I can sit here and attest that when you get that off your chest, you're going to feel, I'm telling you, that gorilla is going to get up and it's going to walk away and you're going to feel like $1 million. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to stuff to deal with or fall out of ramifications, but you are just, when you get that compartmentalized guilt out of you, and guys are good at stuffing that stuff, man. We're like in layers with that. We're like an onion. We just smack at one after another. But I've seen the other side of it. Every time a guy has let go, like legitimately let go of that, gotten it out, I've never not heard him say, I wish I had done that 10 years ago. Holy cow, what have I been missing? I mean, it is amazing. Fear will keep you stuck your entire life. It really can. I've watched full-grown men do it their entire life. And it's awful. It's an awful thing to see. So my hope is in this, when we talk about how do men feel, what is it like to be a man? That to me is what it's like to be a man right there. It is, if you don't battle those demons or face the things you need to face, if you don't get in front of them, you don't find a couple battle buddies, you're going to sit in that foxhole for the rest of your life and you're never going to get out. And there's dudes that have walked their entire lives in secrecy. And at the end of the day, those secrets come out. No, you don't get to keep those stored away forever. And that is a challenge in and of itself. If from a discipleship standpoint, you get in front of another man and walk that journey with him, you may very well be saving his life and his salvation. And it's not because you necessarily have the answers. It's because you're willing to walk that journey and open up that hurt, that scar, whatever it is. And he's willing to put that out with you. Be that guy that listens, because, man alive, the guys that store that stuff up inside, I can't even imagine what that's like.
What a perfect way to segue into yet another scripture. And we're about to close this out here, but another scripture from Timothy, 2 Timothy 1:7. Because there's definitely a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the world, even just to have these conversations that you and I are having. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of courage that it takes to even put this out there. But this is very important, I think, as we're coming to a close, and that is, this gives us an idea of what God wants us to live like. And it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of self-discipline." Other translations say, a sound mind. A sound mind. That's what God wants for us. A sound mind. Discipline. I like this translation. I do like that it says self-discipline. Self-discipline comes as a sound mind is, you could say, is absolutely a product of self-discipline, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, of self-discipline. So this fear, anybody who's listening, dealing with fear, you and I, as we've walked through our lives, having to hide some of the things that we've hidden, it's mostly been out of fear.
Yeah.
Fear that somebody's not going to understand me. Fear that I'm just alone. I'm an oddball. Nobody could ever get this. Nobody could ever grasp what I've been through. I could never explain it. I could never put it into the right words. Well, that's not what God wants. God doesn't want that fear to be what takes over and creeps in on our life and make us powerless. Because that's what fear really does at the end of the day. And that there's no coincidence that there's so many scriptures in the Bible that encourage us not to fear. Do not fear. Because fear is what makes us begin to believe in those lies that we can't do this. Nobody will ever understand. I'm completely alone. It's all a lie that comes out of being afraid. God's will for our lives, our purpose on this planet is not to be afraid, but it's so that we can have power, love, and a sound mind. Those are things that we need as men to be able to carry what we're supposed to carry every day. And one of those most important things is our cross and what that looks like on a daily basis. Denying ourselves, carrying our cross. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy, and it never will be easy. But it can absolutely be easier if we make sure that we have that circle around us of brothers, of other men, iron sharpening iron, that we know we can count on, we can share with, we can talk to, we can be encouraged by, and we can also turn around and do encouraging as well, because it goes both ways. With all of these things that we've talked about, I really believe, hopefully, my prayer is that anybody who's listened to this can begin to be inspired to have conversations, be inspired to maybe pick a Bible up, read a couple of verses, maybe some of the verses that we've just mentioned today. Begin to let it kind of settle into your mind and start to think about it a little bit more. Think about the life that God would intend for you to live. Not just the life that you've been, whether it's been forced on you, whether you've just allowed it to just be that you're just living and you're okay with it. Think about the life that God wants you to live. Because according to his own word, it's not a life in fear.
Right.
It's not a life in fear.
Amen. Good.
I think we
Good
covered
show.
a lot.
We did.
Covered a lot today.
There's a lot to this, and hopefully it gives some perspective. The takeaway that I'll leave, because I think you did a good job. We could attach a bunch of scriptures right at the end of this podcast video as points of reference for people to go back to. But the one thing that I think is really important for people to understand is Jared doesn't have all the answers. Micah doesn't have all the answers. This is just perspective from life experience, observations. Your thing is your thing. What you're going through is your thing. But the key, no matter what, you got to have people to walk that journey with. At the end of the day, you got to have people to walk that journey with, because twofold, really simple. One, you got to have somebody to reveal your stuff to get the baggage out. That's not just scriptural. That's just flipping common sense. Otherwise, you're just revealing it to yourself in the mirror, but you're not really dealing with it. You're just saying it out loud, and then you're walking away from it, and then you go back and you're dealing with the same thing. When you put accountability at somebody else's doorstep on the thing that you're going through, to hold you to account, not to beat you up, but to hold you to account, to help you walk that journey of release and recovery. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't even need to hear Bible or God in that. That's just baseline common sense. That's like one of those things that 2 + 2 = 4. But knowing that there's salvation behind that, knowing there's eternal promise behind that, knowing that, fill in all sorts of blanks on that, then I have hope. Then I have faith in something. Then it's different. It's not just knowing that it's there. It's that there's something after that I can cling to, that I can run to, that I can take stock in. And for me, I'm never going to leave somebody in a foxhole. I just won't do it. They keep diving back into that foxhole. Then I have to have accountability, and I either have to step away or I have to say, hey, this isn't working. But I'm never going to not try. And that to me is what love comes from, because it's faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Well, I'm going to love. I'm going to love to the best of my ability. And I'm going to have faith that it's going to work. And I'm going to hope, right? Because in SWAT, we always said, hope's not a battle plan. You got a battle plan, and when the battle plan doesn't work and you get backed into a corner, you hope you get out. But in Scripture, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. I'm going to start with love, and I'm going to have faith that it's going to work, and I'm going to hope that it's going to work out. And it doesn't mean everything will. I think you did a good job earlier saying that. So, my point, I just wanted to kind of put an exclamation point on is go to people that not only you trusted, but that will hold you to account. Because just going to somebody and sharing something that is of like mind, that agrees with you, and it's a bad thing, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're just going to get supported by somebody who's going to be willing to do that. You got to go to somebody who's going to hold you to account, who's going to disagree with you respectfully and say, hey, you're making some bad decisions, and we need to talk about this, and maybe even bring in a third person. That is an entirely different faith journey. That's an entirely different walk, in my opinion.
Be watchful, stand firm in faith, act like men, be strong, let all that you do be done in love.
Yeah.
That's 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14. What a perfect way after what you just said to really bring us to a close here. And that is, do it in love. The motivation, the intent behind all of what we're talking about, all of what we're doing, it matters.
Yep.
Do it in love. And that's where, as men, that's where we have to make sure that our motivation is coming from. That's our purpose. Our purpose is to be put on this earth because we're loved and to love. Mm-hmm. We're loved by God, and we're put on this earth to love others. Whenever we're going to work, working hard, carrying what we have to carry every day, providing for our families, bettering ourselves as men, as husbands, as brothers, as businessmen, as business owners, as employees, employers, whatever it may be, as we're bettering ourselves as men, the intent behind that is love. If we're doing it out of obligation, going to fail. If we're doing it out of frustration, definitely going to fail. If we're doing it because we feel like that we have to make somebody else happy, probably going to end up being some pent-up stuff. But if we're doing it out of love, if that's the source, if we're doing it because we understand that premise, we're on this earth because we're loved, and we're supposed to turn around and do what we do on this earth because we love. Do it all out of love. I love that scripture. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. There's a lot just in that.
Yeah.
But then it ends it with saying, let all that you do be done in love.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah, and you ended with what we started with. I said there's a lot of tough guys, a lot of bad dudes, but there's not very strong leaders, that many strong leaders, and that's what that just said. You got to be strong. You have to be strong. People will recognize strength. They will cling to strength. They will follow strength. They will go to strength. Absolutely. I believe that. Fundamentally, I believe that.
I believe so too. All right. Well, you want to end us out?
Yeah. Close this thing out. All right. Father God, thank you for an amazing opportunity to sit down with Jared today and discuss, I think in depth, what is really misunderstood so often by so many, and that's what it's like to be a man. And I hope we covered some topics today that will help with that. And maybe we do a deeper dive at another time, but I'm grateful that I can exercise hurts with the good feelings and the emotions, get those out for the world to see and realize that it's okay to be vulnerable, but at the exact same time, you want to have strength in that. You want to lean into a battle buddy. You want to have people that surround you that you're accountable to and that you can be accountable with. And I'm grateful that I have a God that designed and created us in a way to understand that. And for me, on a personal level, having that has saved my life more than once. So I can attest to it. I have perspective on it, and I'm grateful that I can lean into you and keep, seeking salvation, but also keep seeking men and people of character and wisdom that will hold me to account. So with that, we close this day out. We close it out in your name. Pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, man. Good one. Very good one.